What's up, Stimulus TV, Twitch universe? My name is David Redish. I'm going to be interviewing my good friend Jeremy Hoffman today, and this is Facing the Wave. It's a live conversation about psychedelics and plant medicine in the modern era, and I'm not going to take too much time describing it. We're just going to get into it. My friend here, Jeremy, is innovative coach, transformational coach. He bridges the gap between science and spirituality. It works with innovative modalities like breath work, energy clearing, different activations, intuitive channeling. And his goal is to awaken your greatest potential. And today we're going to talk more about plant medicine and how that's a modality that Jeremy works with. And we're going to be focused on microdosing, as well as a few other topics. And then at the end of the conversation, in about 30 or 40 minutes, we'll open it up for some questions. So if you have some, please post them in the chat and we'll jump into them. So Jeremy, why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about yourself and tell us how you're doing.
Yeah, man. I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Dave. Thank you to Stimulus TV, Twitch Universe. I've been getting into watching Twitch and watching all these live streams as well as with the content that I'm doing. So very grateful to be here. And yeah, I would call myself a facilitator of transformation. So for the past year and a half, especially, I've been focusing on building products, businesses, and programs that support individuals on their own inner transformation, that supports them to really wake up to the power of presence and the power of their own medicine from within. And sometimes that's working with plant medicine, sometimes that's breath and sound, and other times that's just, really good human connection dialogue or a new product, a new business idea. So there's a lot of beautiful things happening on my side of things, and I'm super excited to get into talking about microdosing and some more plant medicines as well, because microdosing has made a significant impact on my life, and I dove heavily into the industry up here in Vancouver, Canada. So I'd love to share whatever knowledge comes through and get into a really good discussion with you about it.
Awesome. And like most of our chats, we go pretty deep, pretty fast. So we'll start kind of at the surface level of what microdosing psychedelics is, and kind of the practice that goes into it, because there is a protocol, and I think it's important to start there, and then we can work into some of the more nuanced reactions. So a microdose is 5 to 10 micrograms of LSD or 0.1 to 0.4 grams of psilocybin mushrooms. The doses vary, and honestly, the doses at this point are going to depend on your personal reaction to the medicine. But the idea is that there's no psychoactive reaction, that you're not journeying, you're not tripping, you're not feeling the effect in any way that is psychedelic. It could be a mood stabilizer, it could be an enhancer, but it's certainly not a psychedelic journey. So Jeremy, why don't you jump in and take that from where I left it?
Yeah, so it's sub-perceptual, right? And so with microdosing comes a lot of the change of the stigma that was developed in the 50s and 60s of, tripping out, whether it's LSD or mushrooms. And so when we're talking of microdosing, we need to realize, like you suggested there, that we're not tripping, out, we're taking a sub-perceptual amount. So 5 to 10, 12 mics of LSD, 100 to 300 to 400 milligrams. That's even on the higher side. I like to really keep it between 120 and 200 even for microdose side of things. And so, we're taking sub-perceptual amounts. We're not tripping. We're starting to build the connections and fire inside of the brain, but you're supposed to be able to go about your everyday life. So that's the beauty of the research that's being done, and also the individual being aware of where they're at, so that, you can make a bit of an adjustment. Maybe 200 milligrams of a mushroom microdose or psilocybin microdose is too much for you. And maybe you cut it back, right? So you find where that sub-perceptual range is, because we want people to be able to go about their everyday lives and use this medicine to really help them. And whether that's combating anxiety or addiction or helping boost their productivity and creativity, finding that sub-perceptual range is definitely critical.
Absolutely. And then also on the protocol, as far as the timing and the frequency of use, I know there is no set protocol. And then there's the Stamets stack, which is kind of Paul Stamets' recommendation of usage. There's Jim Fadiman's protocol, and Jim Fadiman is an amazing scientist who's led most of the empirical research that's been done on microdosing psychedelics. Do you have a regimen that you sort of suggest or that you start with to point people at?
Yeah, so what I've been suggesting people, I personally like to do every third day. And for people who kind of get lost on what every third day looks like, it can be a bit of a challenge. So what I've actually been suggesting people to do is do Wednesday and then Saturday, Sunday. And hitting the dose Saturday, Sunday, back-to-back days seems to create a very nice effect and create an extremely good afterglow for their week with another little dose on Wednesday. So for me, again, I respect, I love James Fadiman and Paul Stamets, and I'm really curious to see the research that comes out as we can dial in, the exact best times. But currently I'm suggesting, and what I like to practice is Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday, and I like to take it right after I eat breakfast in the morning. I usually eat a very light breakfast, even if it's just coffee or some tea or water. I suggest people take it in the morning or early afternoon. I also suggest after the first week of microdosing to really, we'll go into this a little bit further, but to be aware of how you're feeling so that you can make those adjustments for yourself. Maybe you wanted a little bit more energy in your afternoon, or that creative buzz in your afternoon instead of your morning. So maybe you take it after lunch, or it becomes a process that you work with. And I think that's what we're going to find with microdosing is it's very unique to the individual. So building that relationship with that medicine and then being able to apply that into your schedule, into your routine is where I think people are going to find the most benefit. But yeah, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday is what I like.
I think so too. My personal recommendation, or what I found for me, is keeping that similar, like every third day gap. I like the sort of like wave that it creates. You have your first day on where you might notice the microdose slightly more. The second day is sort of like an afterglow effect, if you will. And then the third day, you're kind of like going back to equilibrium and start the cycle again. So it is interesting. I think also that the time frame we're talking about, like how many days or weeks, where do you start to suggest people?
Yeah, so I would suggest people, if they're going to be trying microdosing, to do it for at least a month. Microdosing isn't something that you're like, oh, I'm going to try it today and then I'm going to try it next week and I'm going to try it the week after. I believe that, when we're working in this world, consistency is really key in anything in our lives, whether it's eating healthy, working out, meditating, reading a book, learning something. We want to be consistent with that. And so I suggest at least doing a month long, all the way up to 3 to 4 months. I wouldn't go more than 4 months. I think after 4 months, if you've been microdosing, integrate that for another at least month to 2. There's no need to take it longer than 4 months. And some people I think Paul Lawson and some of these other guys, did 7 months at a time and then took a break. I think it again comes up to each individual, but for me personally, I think 3 to 4 months is a perfect time, and no less than 1 month for full, commitment to seeing how it works.
Definitely. And you used a great word, and I want to talk about that word, integration, and also intention. And I think let's start with intention, because I think that's a good starting point as starting a microdosing regimen. And then let's talk about integration as it follows afterward.
Cool. Yeah. So intention for me is something that we can actually apply into every single thing we do, because intention is really allowing the power of our minds to come online. And so, whether it's coming onto this call, I did a short meditation to set intention into this stream, right? And that just means, feeling how I would like it to go. And so when we're microdosing, there's a reason why we're choosing to do it. And so to know what that reason is, and to, before you take your dose every other day or every third day, or, whenever you're taking that dose, to have an intention for why you are doing it. And, there's a lot of people that are working with anxiety and depression. There's a lot of people working with addiction. And so let's say you're an alcoholic that wants to use microdosing to quit being an alcoholic. So when you're taking that pill or that little bit of mushrooms, whatever that might be, to set intention, to say, hey, I am using this as a form of medicine to help me break the old habits that I have had in my life. That is my intention, and then eat that, right? And so whatever the intention may be, it could be creativity, right? And just to set a couple words, I like to verbally set an intention. So to verbally speak out, hey, I'm wanting to connect to my creative flow today, like guide me, cleanse me, heal me, and allow me to be present in this moment. And so intention, again, is really just thinking about why you're doing what you're doing, and believing that medicine can help work with you to achieve that.
And I think that's important too, because it's not just like a blind, right? Just eat it and see what happens. And that's never a good idea with any psychedelic, or just a bad way to live your life, likely. Although, particularly with psychedelics, we want to be intentional. And so that's important. And I think everybody can agree. Integration, and that was a word that I had never applied to anything in my life until maybe 3 years ago, and was at Burning Man, and somebody said, "Oh yeah, we're gonna do something in Lake Tahoe. We're gonna integrate." I'm like, integrate what? Like, well, all this change and expansion and everything that just happened and that we've experienced, and like anything in life, we need to take time to integrate, and see how it's going to change us moving forward. So let's talk a little bit about integrating and microdosing, right?
Yeah, I'd love to. And so that's one of the key things that I would like to touch on, is that the power of intention is huge, and then the power of integration as well, right? And so for me, integration is 90% of any experience, and whether that's a more powerful psychedelic experience or even the microdosing, integration is becoming aware of the lessons that you learn inside of any experience that you are keeping note of or keeping track of, that are going to help you actually in your day-to-day life. So how are you integrating what you feel when you're microdosing, or when you are doing a bigger dose of something as well, right? And so for me, the integration really looks like checking in with yourself every day and making notes of the changes that you see, but then making a commitment to applying those. So for example, like you take a microdose, and you're feeling really present, and the voice comes and says, hey, to feel this state of calmness in flow state, try meditating every day. So then the integration process would be that you journal that you should be meditating every day. Make a commitment to yourself to actually show up and do that thing, because that is one of the messages that has come through for you to integrate into your everyday life, right? So integration is really taking the moments outside of any time you're working with a medicine as serious, and really implementing what you've learned into your everyday reality, however that looks to you. So for me, for the integration, it's really tracking that, making some notes, journaling down how you feel. It's a huge part of microdosing, is to be keeping a small dialogue of how you feel each day, so you can look back in 2 months and kind of see the record of how you felt, because you can't always remember, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and the shifts are small, right? That's the idea, is that we're shifting a little bit each day. So the only way we'll really notice that over time is if we find a way to document it. And you brought up and you said another great word that I know we want to talk about, and that's presence. And I think it just dives us into like the why of even looking into something like microdosing. And it could be, like you said, anxiety, depression, addictive habits, all kinds of ways to help treat and overcome some of these ailments that many of us feel, all the time. So, let's talk a little bit about some of those whys, and sort of the idea of presencing ourselves.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And presence is, if I were to speak to where I think this whole microdosing thing is really going to go to, presence is living in the exact moment with no worry or anxiety of the past, and no future illusion of what the future might be. And so There's guys like Eckhart Tolle and some of the most powerful, beautiful teachers of our world talking about the power of this present moment. And so for me, what microdosing really does, and there's going to be more science that proves how this all works, but it's creating a sense of presence in your days so you are more connected to everything that you're doing. Because while I'm on this phone call right now or on this live stream, I could be allowing my mind to think about, what I even said 5 minutes ago, or what I'm going to try to say in 5 minutes, or what I'm doing after this call. But I have a choice to decide to be right here, right now with you, not allowing any of that out external, possibility or past situation to dictate or to take any of my energy or thought. And so microdosing for me brings us into that state of presence. You hear these reports, and I'm a example of this. You take a microdose and you're walking in the forest, and I'm not saying you're tripping, you're not talking to the trees and to the plants, but you definitely start to feel more aware of how that forest smells and the greenery of that forest and the flowers that are budding that maybe you wouldn't have noticed before that now you notice. And so presence is so beautiful, to become aware of how you actually feel in any given moment. And microdosing offers us a beautiful, beautiful reflection of that.
Absolutely. And actually, there's a really good book. It's called A Really Good Day, I believe, and it's by Eilert Waldman. And she describes it that way. It's about her journey of using microdosing to overcome all kinds of psychological ailments that she'd been suffering from, and taking many, many different prescription drugs to try to, help with the ailments. But she just describes the microdosing experience as having a really good day. It's sort of like you don't have this time of profound tripping or something like that. It's at the end of the day, you're kind of reflecting, and you're like, oh yeah, that was a really good day. The trees were greener, the flowers were brighter. And I like to just use that stop and smell the roses thing when it comes to microdosing, because that's the moment of presence where you're like, it's not just hurrying in from one meeting to the other. It's, oh, I'm on my way. Oh, wow, somebody tends to this garden out here every day, and now I'm going to have this meeting, and this is beautiful. And okay, now I'm in the meeting. It's those little moments versus just I'm rushing, I'm looking at my phone, I'm this, I'm that. I think that there is something magical that happens there with this medicine. And in very small increments, it starts to presence you.
You nailed that, man. And that you actually reminded me of one of the examples I like to give to people. And let's say you've taken a microdose, or you haven't taken a microdose, and you're in a meeting, you're in a coffee shop somewhere in a busy city, and maybe you realize you forgot to pay for parking, and you're trying to rush to another meeting, so you run out of the coffee shop, and there's a beautiful sunset going on, and there's someone playing live music on the street, and someone burning a fragrant candle. But when you open that door to the coffee shop, all you can think about is how you probably have a parking ticket and how you're rushing to your next meeting, and you can't even enjoy any of it. So you run to your car, and sure enough, you have a parking ticket, you get pissed off, and you tear off to your next meeting. So how I would describe a potential microdose day, obviously it's different, but how I feel with that presence is you realize that, oh man, I did forget to pay for parking. I really hope I didn't get a ticket, instead of automatically thinking that I did. I opened that door, and instead of rushing right to my vehicle because I'm in such a hurry for this meeting that could wait 30 more seconds, I become aware of the scents around me, and I hear the music from the man playing the guitar, and I look to my left, and I see the beautiful sunset, and then I carry on to my car. There's no ticket, and I get in the car and I drive to my next meeting. And really just starting to appreciate, it's not that we slow down. Like, you're doing a lot of things in your life, I'm doing a lot of things in my life. We're not talking about being present and sniffing the roses and looking at the sunset and not getting things done, but there's a way that we can be in this state of functional flow where we are walking down the road, we are aware of the roses, we are aware of the sunset, we are even aware of our phone. However, our mindset is in a present state moment where we are focused on what is happening around us, and we allow that to continue throughout our days.
And it is magical how it really does just sort of happen that way. And with intention, you really start to feel the impacts. Let's kind of presence this conversation in our current state of affairs, which are, fairly unprecedented. how has microdosing been effective for you in this time of struggle, challenges, however you may look at it?
Yeah, for me personally, and for some of the people that I'm with, um, microdosing gives us an opportunity to work through some of the things that might be keeping us out of the present moment, and it gives us an ability to dampen the default mode network. And the default mode network is a part of your brain that really likes to keep you in that fight or flight response. So in that fear-based, more chaotic mindset. And so for me, what microdosing has been able to do, and for the people around me, is it creates that, or it actually dampens that default mode network. So you're able to see a little bit more of a broader, brighter, bigger picture. And I think right now with the world and the state that it is, it's very sad what's happening, and my heart goes out to those who are being affected by this. Collectively, we're all being given an opportunity as well to look deep within inside of ourselves. And I believe that microdosing right now is a very powerful tool to help you be more aware of what that inside looks like and what that inside needs for you to show up more fully for yourself and to connect back to yourself, because it is helping you create that sense of presence. And when you're setting intention into that, and you're starting to dampen or deactivate part of that default fight or flight response, and you're a little bit more at ease, a little bit more calm, your body is quite literally in a state that is ready to receive, is ready to learn, and it's ready to start, taking better care of itself from the inside out. So right now, I think it's, a beautiful, beautiful medicine that needs to be shared. And that's why I'm so grateful to be on this talk and to be doing what I do and working with you and hearing what you do, because this is a medicine that can really help people, especially in these times.
Definitely. And to whatever length you can, talk about how you are sharing this medicine, obviously speaking about it, but if there's any other depth at which you can speak towards that.
Yeah. So it's a whole interesting thing, and I'm going to be able to share more and more as the weeks and weeks go on. I mean, the first thing I want to talk about quickly is just that with this entire movement, in the 50s and 60s, whether it was the government or whether it was people acting irresponsibly, there's lots of all this, but the main thing that I want to touch on is the intentional and integrity and responsibility that each individual needs to take when speaking, when talking, when using these plant medicines or psychedelics, because we do want this to be something that is available to people who need this medicine or are able to work with this medicine. And that takes intention and responsibility. So to speak on the industry, I mean, I'm in Vancouver in Canada, and things are much different here than it's parts of the States, and definitely different than in a lot of places in the world. Cannabis had last year and a half ago, announced cannabis legalized across the entire country. So, here in Canada, there's dispensaries, but a massive amount of the industry is still done online, which is beautiful. And so for microdosing, what we're starting to see is we're starting to see a lot of the same doctors, scientists, and lawyers that worked on the cannabis industry for the past 20 years start to come online with the psilocybin magic mushroom world. And so we're seeing big changes. There are people starting to step up to start to challenge and change some of the laws that are governing this, because there is so much research that has come out and is continuing to come out of how powerful this is as a medicine. And so there are talks of clinics starting to open up where they can suggest use of psilocybin. They can't give it to you yet. That's still going to be, maybe 2-3 years down the road, depending on how it looks with extractions of the actual psilocybin and psilocin. But there is already clinics and there is already people that are able to start to suggest and help guide you through a microdosing or potentially even a macro dose. And the regulations on the back end are, there are starting to be the right mushroom laws and, regulation of what the standard might look like. What does the standard look like for working with psilocybin or mushrooms? Is it a standardized amount of dried mushroom? Are we extracting the psilocybin out of it? When we extract the psilocybin out of it, we lose some of the other compounds that are in what we know as psilocybin or magic mushrooms. There's 5 other beautiful compounds in there and more. So we're really just kind of seeing in the next weeks and months, especially with the whole COVID situation right now, it's putting a bit of a halt on certain things, but there are research and development licenses coming out. They are in the works of starting to be able to, grow these and study these. And I got word of, research that's being done in Jamaica, being able to take blends and go start testing them, and, privately working with communities of people who are sharing their data and their surveys on how microdosing is making them feel. And I guess that's kind of how I can tie this all together is there are people through my network, through networks around the world that are really working on bringing this medicine, proving its ability. And what it really takes is us on a community level, doing our own experiments very responsibly, but then sharing that information with the right people so that we can be getting these case studies and we can be gathering this data, so we don't have to wait for phase 1, 2, 3 all of the time, that we can start to share this information with the researchers, with the scientists, with the doctors who are really passionate about knowing how they can bring this to the world.
No doubt. And I appreciate your work and your effort in that space.
Yeah, it's a beautiful journey.
Right. So let's talk, and we'll probably speak more from like personal experience, but some of the like pros and cons of microdosing, some of the like reasons why either of us have used them, and some of the benefits we've seen, why we would continue to use them, why we would, and what frequency. So, I know for me, I've in the past experienced a lot of anxiety, depression, just these sort of like mood swing sort of feelings, and mostly like internal, and got very good at like holding it in and pretending, showing the outside world that it wasn't going on. And I know for me, like bringing in a microdosing regimen helped bring a lot of presence around those feelings. It didn't stop them from happening. And that wasn't the goal. I think the goal was to get a better understanding of why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And ultimately the microdosing helped me slow down and check in with myself and with past events in my life that had kept me, in certain patterns and with certain habits, and addictive habits and things that were like less healthy. And it just helped me slow down, notice them. And it created those intentional loops, like we talked about, taking those notes every day. And it helped me tap more into my creative potential because I was less consumed with these fears and anxieties and more tapped into what is today and why am I waking up and excited about anything I want to do, and it gave me that kind of space. So that was my sort of overall take. What are some of your, downloads?
I love the word download. That's very beautiful the way you said it, and that resonates deeply with me. And for me personally, I had struggled a lot with anxiety, and I wouldn't say I had strong depression outside of the fact that my anxiety would get so bad, and it was consistently bad for 1.5 to 2 years, where I woke up and I almost felt drunk, like hungover type of feeling, even though I wasn't drinking. My heart was pounding, and so I actually started to feel depressed because of how powerless I felt to my anxiety. And so this is actually as I had been doing other plant medicines as well that were supposed to be helping, but because I didn't have any form of integration, I became super present and aware of all of the things that I could have been doing maybe wrong in my life, but I felt very powerless to make that change. And if I did a macro dose of mushrooms, let's say, it kind of like hit me like a wave. It was an incredible experience, but I didn't even know how to integrate that after. Like, what do I do with that? So microdosing came online as an ability for me to stay very much in my cognitive mind, stay very much present with my surroundings, but it did create that awareness and that presence and really gentle reminders of what I could do to be bettering and feeling more well. And so it did connect me back to my creative flow, because again, when you're not worrying about what's happened or what might happen, and you're just in that moment, you'd be amazed that the type of artist or writer or the way you can move or laugh or share. And so for me, microdosing was really a tool to work with my anxiety and also really boost my creativity because of my anxiety, I was never present. And then it really hindered my ability to create and to show up in the world as I do now. So microdosing for me was to combat that anxiety and then to boost my creative flow. And it's a beautiful journey. It's been incredible.
Nice. And
I mean, the only con I would just say is that very transparent. The only thing that I notice sometimes with microdosing is that it can make me feel a little bit tired. And I usually just take, it's not every day, and I usually actually take that as a sign of my body being like, hey, you need to rest a little bit more. And so I don't take that as, I'm tired. I literally just take that as my body feels tired. That's probably the only, con that I have is sometimes I feel a little bit sleepy, and I'm okay with that because it's usually my body just saying, hey, be present with how you feel and rest a little bit more.
Yeah. And I'll speak like to some of the cons that I felt. And looking back now, I think mostly what I was experiencing was a lack of integrating the experience very well because it's such a small dose, unlike a macro dose of psychedelics. I was sort of like letting the experience wash over me. And then, after a month or so of taking them, be like, okay, and go back into whatever I was doing before. And I also just felt like over time, as I hit that 4th or 5th week, I was a little bit more introspective, a little more like removed from, I was present, but in a different way. Like if there was a conversation going on that I would normally jump into, I found myself sitting back more on the sidelines and just observing, which wasn't a bad thing, but it did start to create some anxiety in me, like something wrong with me, this isn't normal. So for me, that was a sign of like, all right, I'm gonna like pause on the microdosing. I'm gonna like notice what's going on. And after like a week or so, like that sort of feeling lifted, and it was just a good reminder of, okay, that was the time to pause on the microdosing and see what happens next and actually integrate the experience. And to the point now where, having done a few cycles of microdosing, I really don't feel the need at this time to do it. I feel like the positive effects are lasting. The shifts that I've made are lasting. And at a time when I do like turn back to using that medicine, I can be very intentional about it. I can like set a goal in mind. I can have a certain time frame of something that's going on in my life that I want to be tapped in for. But ultimately, the goal for me, and I think for most, is that we don't want to be taking something every day of our life from now until the last day that we're here. We want to take something that helps us get over whatever ailments or suffering we may be experiencing to the point where we don't really need those things anymore.
I agree.
And then I think, personally, that's a hang up I have with a lot of Western medicine, and that a lot of treatments are just like ongoing. And that's it's a challenge, and there's a whole business side to why that exists that we don't have to get into today. But let me jump into the Twitch really quick and see if we have any questions going on. In the meantime, I did have a question from a friend that I was texting with last night to tell him, hey, you better join this Twitch so I have some people viewing it. But he said, what's your personal take on the difference of microdosing LSD versus psilocybin? And my answer was mostly that I have had much more experience microdosing psilocybin, mainly because it's easier to dose. You have this plant matter, you grind it up, you weigh it out on a scale, and okay, great, this is the dose that I need. Unless you have, in my opinion, liquid LSD that you can dilute very accurately, I find that it's probably harder to create the like proper dosing. What's your take there?
Yeah, so I've actually experimented with both almost as much. And so, I mean, when I microdose, I I have been, working around here. So we have it done into capsules that have, or the microdose that I take is already done into a capsule that has lion's mane, reishi, guarana, and vitamin D3. So it's already exactly dosed, and it's also tested, so I know exactly how much psilocybin is in that capsule. And so that was beautiful, but as well. I have contacts, and I had worked with people in the past. I've seen them in the industry of actual micro doses of LSD that were put into mints and also into little candies. So there are products starting to be developed that are actual, little mints that have 5 mics. There are little candies that have 12 mics. So let's say you wanted to take, between 10 and 15, you could take 2 of those, or you could take 3 of those, and that's a beautiful microdose, or you could stay at the 5. And also into little candies. So there is.
Yes.
Yeah. And
that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me personally, if I were, it is true to dose it. I mean, for anyone listening, if people are ever going to do this, it isn't accurate to take a tab of acid and just to cut it up into little pieces. You are guessing. But I mean, at the same time, you're going to be getting exactly what is needed in that moment. But for me, the difference between them, I view mushrooms or psilocybin as a way to really help you work through what might be keeping you out of the present moment. And so whether that is more introspection, whether that is, a pain in your body, or what a thought in your mind, it's really helping you become more present. And for me, LSD is something that really just turns on the light bulbs in my brain. That's the best way I can explain it. Even on a microdose, I'm not as introspective. I'm not like working through anything really when I'm doing LSD. I'm really in creation, observation world. If I'm taking a microdose, I want to make sure I'm like working on something really creative, or working on a project. So I really look at the two as mushrooms being the thing that's more of like a medicine, as the way it's really helping your mind. It's helping your brain communicate to parts of your brain that don't usually communicate. It's waking up your brain to be more online. And then the LSD is almost like the after that brain is already starting to work a little bit more online. Taking that little microdose of LSD is really just making that light bulb shine bright and really firing all those neurons in your brain.
Awesome. Nice. Thank you for that. Yeah. So I'm not seeing any questions at the moment pop up in the chat, but that may be because I'm not logged into it properly. But we can just dive into our own musings here. And I think you did send me something pretty cool yesterday about a study done to help curb the addiction of cigarettes and nicotine with microdosing. You want to chat about that a little bit? I think it's a cool subject.
I'll talk about that and even alcoholism. And I'd have to look up the actual research. That was a blog that we wrote. But as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure there's more studies coming out on this, as we are talking, there's probably someone researching this, hopefully. But they're showing that with addiction in alcoholism and in smoking, that up to 80% of people that are using this microdosing medicine to quit these addictions are completely free of that addiction, even up to a year to 2 years later. And so they're saying it's double as potent or effective as the nicotine patch. Because what you touched on too with, traditional Western medicine is that we like to give people, or they've liked to give people, something that doesn't necessarily get to the root or fix. It's more of a Band-Aid. And so if you're a smoker and you're addicted to nicotine, but then you get stuck having to buy and put a patch on you that just puts nicotine back into your body, you're not getting rid of the addiction. You're just, not smoking anymore. And so again, because of the presence that they offer in the medicine, that how it starts to work in your mind, you start to realize you don't need external things to feel better, because that presence is all that you need. And my perspective on all of this healing is that people, have said that we're broken, we need to be fixed, and all these, we're sick. I don't think that. I think that in those moments of presence, you are whole, you are healed, you are complete. And we forget that outside of that present moment based on our fear and our stress. And so, when you're microdosing and you're becoming more present, maybe you don't need that glass or that beer every single night. Maybe you don't want to go out and drink because you've taken a microdose in that day and you're feeling really present and you're really content with, reading a book on the couch instead of going out to the loud bar with your friends like you've done every other weekend, right? And so that's a little bit of the separate on the recreational side, but on the clinical side, using it, they're seeing tremendous tremendous results in the addiction, and that's one of the ones I'm most excited for, to see these results come out, because we can prove that microdosing can, like, be one of the most powerful benefits. One of the most powerful benefits of it is to curb addiction. I think addiction is something that really is a struggle in our world right now, because we have addictions to so many things, and we can prove that it works with addiction. I think that's going to be a huge asset to mankind.
Absolutely. And it should be, because addiction applies to everyone, whether we're aware of it or not. Okay, my good homie Caesar just screenshotted me some questions, so thank you for that.
Cool.
Okay, one question was, what are you really trying to achieve with microdosing? What's the end goal? So, like, talking about that intention, like, what's the end goal of doing this?
Personally or in general?
I think personally is really the only place you can go, but if you want to speak generally, that's fine too.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. I mean, I'm kind of with you. Is my personal journey of microdosing. I have been microdosing and researching it and trying out different blends of different ingredients with it for about 2 years. So I'm at the state right now too where I'm much more like you, where when I do decide to microdose, I just go in with that intention. And so for me personally right now, most of it comes down to strengthening my inner connection, and tapping into that present moment, and then integrating that heightened state of presence when I'm using a tool or a substance, and really integrating, remembering, building the neural pathways essentially to that state of consciousness or present moment, and then taking what I've learned there, applying it into business and applying that into my everyday life. So that's what I see it for me, and what I see in most other people around me is what I'm really noticing is the same thing. People are taking this, they're feeling more present, they're feeling more aware, and sometimes they do go through a week or two of becoming a little bit more aware of where their energy has been going. What has been limiting them. I'm doing a self-mastery group program right now. I have 15 people in my group, and the second week is limitations and the fear, the illusion of all of that. And some of them have been doing their own experiment with microdosing, and this week brought up a lot of their shit, for lack of better words, but they all feel like they have the presence and the ability to work through that, because their mind isn't racing around as much. It's a little bit more calm, a little bit more present, and a little bit more clear on what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Exactly. There was another question here about the science behind microdosing and alcoholism. And I think, without getting too far into it, I know the blog you sent followed a John Hopkins study, and we can repost that. If you follow my social or Jeremy's, and mine's on Instagram is at Redish, DREDISHD, as in David. And Jeremy, why don't you plug yours really quick?
Yeah, and mine is Jeremy J. Hoffman for Instagram. So JEREMY with a J, and then HOFFMANN. And yeah, we can post those studies up there for people to see. It is mostly done through John Hopkins right now, definitely.
Yeah, and I think, just speaking generally to that point, we know that psychedelics increase neuroplasticity in the brain, which essentially just means creating new neural pathways. If you want to think of that in a more tangible way, when you wake up in the morning after having slept a good night's sleep all night, you have the most new neural pathways that you're going to have all day, generally speaking. So you're going to have the most fresh new thoughts. Your brain is functioning really efficiently, and psychedelics and microdosing helps to stimulate more neuroplasticity. So in regards to curbing addictions, you can think of it like you're creating new pathways for your brain to operate. You're rewiring it, so to speak. You want, feel free to dive in deeper there.
Yeah, exactly. So you're rewiring, and I think of our minds as being a lot like computers, right? And so when your computer can already start to learn your habits, and unless you're giving it a new habit, it will default into an old habit. And so with this neuroplasticity, we can really start to reprogram, the direction we want our minds to go. So if we're setting intention into curbing this addiction, and we're quite literally thinking the thoughts, and allowing our minds to create these new neural pathways and to connect to different parts of our brain that we haven't been using before, with the intention of quitting smoking, with the intention of quitting drinking. You are quite literally developing and connecting parts of your brain that you didn't even know you could do. And once you start to realize that, wow, that actually did help me, like maybe you start microdosing, maybe you don't quit smoking right on that day, right? But after a couple of days, or maybe after a week, you're like, oh, I'm craving my smoke a little bit less. Oh, I'm craving that drink a little bit less. And then once you start to believe in what you're doing, that it's actually working as well, then that really starts to come online, right? Then you're really believing in the process, and then the process on the inside is starting to reprogram, and it becomes a beautiful, beautiful process of healing and transformation.
And it really does work that way. Yeah. So, okay, we'll do one more question, and then, and quickly, C Noco 20 asks if we're doctors, we're nutritionists. I'm a filmmaker, and I've spent the past 4 years researching psychedelics, doing my own experimentation, speaking with lots of experts. And just to kind of bring full circle the title of this show, Facing the Wave, that is the name of a documentary that I started production on just before the pandemic sort of put these physical distancing laws into effect. But working with, a few experts in the field that are co-producing with me, and then having been collecting interviews. Jeremy was a subject and is a subject that I plan to go up to Canada and work with. And now we've just taken the conversations to this live setting instead of halting the production. This is a way that we can continue to spread the message and continue the research and continue gathering the story. Jeremy, if you want to speak towards any of your qualifications.
Yeah, so I'm in the same. I've been in the plant medicine psychedelic space for about 6 years, and I come from more of the ceremonial shamanic, South American type of vibe with plant medicines. I've been facilitating and partaking in 100+ intentional psychedelic ceremonies all around the world. And on a personal level, I've been researching, I've been working with, it's a lot like Dave, working with some of the top scientists and doctors and lawyers and people that are in this industry that are doing this science, and learning from them, doing my own research, working quite regularly with myself in different doses and how it makes me feel, and journaling this, and, helping people in that way as well. So, he's not a doctor, I'm not a doctor. We're just speaking from our personal experience, and from the research that we have learned, and really bringing the awareness around this subject that, it's something that people are curious about, and there's lots of information out there, and we're just making sure that education and awareness is shared so that people can do this intentionally, and also that, we can show the government and the pharmaceuticals that we are being responsible, and this is a medicine that needs to be taken more seriously and brought to the public in whichever way it seems to flow.
Absolutely. And I think our time is almost up, and I just want to kind of continue that message forward because this is a good point. Yes, we're not doctors or medical professionals. Any of the ideas we've expressed are our own. We're following protocols from established leaders in this space. But like anything, please use caution. We're not condoning any of these actions or suggesting them. This is of your own volition and your own choice making. I think we can both speak from our own personal experience that we've had lots of positive effects from using plant medicine and microdosing. But we certainly can't suggest it, and we certainly can say that like everything, this isn't for everyone, and use caution, because like any substance you put in your body, it will have an impact, and every human is different, and your experience will be unique to you.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, it's true, and we can only speak from our personal experience in these times, and there's so much research there is, guys. I'm sure we're gonna, if you check out either of our social medias, and if there's links, but there's lots of beautiful research and information being done on this subject. So educate yourselves. We all want to have our own education. No one can tell you what's right or wrong, whether, even if it is a doctor, they're still telling you their opinion based on what they've learned, but it's still your body, it's still your mind. And so educate yourselves, invest in yourselves with that knowledge. And yeah, that's the best that I can say on that.
Awesome. And Jeremy, one more time, plug your website, your social, before we go.
Cool. Yeah. So the website is www.jeremyjhoffman.com. There's 2 F's and 2 N's in my name. And the same on Instagram, Jeremy J. Hoffman. I have a lot of really cool things that I'm up to, that I'm co-creating all around. And more and more opportunities are continuing to present themselves. And this was a pleasure, David. A pleasure to be on Stimulus TV, to go live on Twitch. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. And I'm David Redish. This is Facing the Wave Live. We'll be back every Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern. I'm sure we'll have Jeremy back to talk more and go deeper on other plant medicines and other experiences. And until then, thank you guys so much for tuning in. And please send me questions. My social is best on Instagram at Redish, Redish, and D as in David. Thanks, guys. Much love. Bye.